Today I'm going to show you how I do glazing. This is going to be my techniques and what I use for glazing on skin tones, and I'm going to use this model as my subject for this video. Hello everyone and welcome back to another packet of spaghetti rolled up in a salmon beef jerky. Today I'm going to be showing you how I do glazes on models like these. This is not going to be a skin tutorial. This is just going to be showing you how I do glazes. You can use this technique for anything you want to use it for. The colors do not have to match. As long as you're using the same technique, the same procedure, it probably will do the exact same thing. So this is a wet palette. I use a wet palette for everything that I do. It's basically just a Tupperware or a tub with a sponge in it, and I'm going to show you how I've set up my wet palette so you can use one for your painting. I fill it up with water so that the sponge is fully saturated. You want the sponge to be like really wet. Once the sponge is floating around in the tub, I then pour off the excess water. There's still a little bit of water left in there though, but not too much. Then I take my sheet. This is basically a form of parchment paper. I place my sheet on, and it's going to want to wrinkle up, so I like to keep pressing down on it to make sure that it's nice and flat. So what I will do is I will water down the basic color that I'm going to paint with and do a good solid base coat. Whilst I'm doing that base coat though, I'll pay attention to things like shadows and highlights already. So I may, for example, do quite a wet blend where I will add like a lighter color to my base color and just do a wet blend, something like that. And this is how we'll start to build it up. One thing to know when you're doing a glaze, for example, it's not absolutely necessary, but for big smooth areas, a big brush, a big soft brush will work a lot better than a small little brush. I'll try my best to explain what a glaze is. A glaze is pretty much just a thinned version of the color that you would paint standard. If I were to paint this color, it would be way too bright. You can see how easily it stands out on the model. So I need to create some kind of transition between this color and that color. So how I do that is by thinning that paint down to next to nothing. So the paint itself will, in theory, just be water that's slightly tinted. This is going to become my glaze, and what I will do is I will use a piece of kitchen towel and wick off the excess paint so that there isn't too much paint on the brush, and I will then paint that over the areas that I want now to be lighter, paying careful attention to making sure that the streak marks of the brush aren't showing up. If you go over it with a nice big brush, you can slowly but surely direct the streak marks from your brush. And what we're going to do is we're going to paint one layer and let that dry. Now because it's water on its own, it's going to dry a lot quicker than standard paint. Your time in between layers isn't going to be as much. However, there is still going to be a wait. Don't try to continue painting if a paint layer before is wet. It will ruin the glaze, so don't do it until it's dry, completely dry. You can use a hairdryer to speed up the process. So I will now go over this layer again paying attention to where the brush strokes are. The first one or two layers you won't actually see much of a difference. It's going to take 3 or 4 layers before you start seeing a full difference between the layers before. So again, showing you what I do with the paint. It's really watered down. It's super thin. I load it up onto my brush. I put my brush onto a dry paper towel and I wick out all the excess paint, so that there is paint in here. But if you look, the paint itself is so thin that you can barely even see if I put on a layer. And it's because of that thinness of the paint that helps build up the awesome blends that you get from doing a glaze. Making sure that each layer is dry. Never ever ever paint on a wet layer, because it will streak and it will ruin everything you've laid down before. I'm slowly but surely where I want my highlights to be. I can just keep painting more and more over the highlighted areas. The more I paint, the more of a tint I add to that undercoat. So eventually, after 10 to 20 layers, you're going to start getting closer to the true color that was already on the palette before you thinned it down. So the whole point is that you're taking one specific color and splitting it up into thin layers that are a little bit more see-through, and you're layering those layers over the top of each other, and that creates a super smooth illusion of shade. This is not the only way to create a smooth shade, but this is one of the ways that I like to do, specifically on skins. Only in the areas where the light would be. I'm going to build it layer by layer by layer to get an awesome skin tone. Skin's made up of multiple colors. It's not just one color, and this is a good way of making your eye see what it thinks is skin. So moving on to the next color, I'm going to take some of these two colors and I'm going to mix them back into the old color that I had already. Put a lot of water into it. Again, make it super thin. It can almost never be too thin. You can experiment with how thin you prefer it. Like, sometimes if it's really thin, it gives you more chances to build up to the color that you want. If it's too thick, you can put down color a little bit too fast. Thank you for watching my channel. I hope this helped you learn something today. If you would like to learn something in the future, something that I might be able to help you with, let me know in the comments below and I'll try and get back to you or make a video on that specific subject. If you didn't like the video, I think you know what to do. Just click dislike and fuck off. Stop recording, cause it's fucking ridiculous now.